Thank you for coming here tonight. Welcome. The 2nd Congressional District is proud to present the first of 3 forums that are intended to allow you to get to know our 2 congressional candidates, Angie Craig and Jeff Erdmann, a little bit better. I'm Sue Moravec. I'm the chair of the 2nd Congressional District DFL. I'm going to moderate tonight. I'm going to give a brief explanation of how this process is going to work tonight. First of all, if you are using social media, we want you to use the hashtag MN02 for MN02. The candidates have agreed to 3 forums in total. We're going to hold another forum in Northfield on January 15th and a forum in Red Wing on January 22nd. The questions that we're asking tonight are a combination of questions that were submitted by the public online and by the committee. And I want to take this chance to thank the committee. Peggy Ann Hawkins, Don Slayton, Linda Garrett Johnson, and Glenn Lloyd were very helpful in helping to put this event together. The questions were reviewed and submitted to both candidates in advance, so they had an opportunity to see the questions. However, we sent them more than twice as many questions as we'll actually have time to ask tonight. They do not know which questions we've selected to ask. The campaigns were each allowed to remove 3 questions that they may or may not have opted to do. I'm going to be asking the questions. We're going to ask the audience to be quiet during this evening and refrain from applauding or calling out until each candidate has a chance to give a closing statement. Each candidate is going to give an opening statement that lasts 3 minutes, and at the end of the opening statement, they will be asked one question, and it's a yes or no answer only, 1 word, yes or no. Will you abide by the DFL endorsement? And then the next candidate will give their introduction and be asked the same question. We drew straws. The long straw speaks first. Angie chose a long straw, so she'll be the first to speak and first to answer the question about the endorsement. After we give the introductions, we'll reverse the order of speaking. So Jeff will be the first person to answer a full question, and he will also be the first person to make a closing statement. Are we all set? I think I've said everything I need to say. Oh, and rebuttal is at the option of the moderator. This is not intended to be a debate. This is intended to be a forum where you get to know the candidates better. But if I hear anything that brings a question where the other candidate is addressed directly, I have the option to offer a 1-minute rebuttal. Otherwise, all the questions you're hearing tonight are going to be given 2 minutes to answer. So we're actually giving in-depth opportunities for you to hear full answers. Peggy Ann Hawkins is our timekeeper. She's going to be holding cards and watching time, and we are going to be very strict about the time allotment, and you don't want me coming up here and yanking your elbow. So Angie, you are first to speak. Welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Angie Craig, and I am seeking the DFL endorsement for a rematch with Jason Lewis in 2018. I grew up in a mobile home park in rural America. My mom was a single mom who raised 3 kids almost by herself. When I was growing up, the one thing I remember more than anything was my mom at the kitchen table studying, because for 10 years she went to college at night, community colleges and junior colleges, working her way through school to become a teacher. I know how important the American dream is because I'm standing here before you telling you I've lived it. I went to school and I had 2 college choices. Which state college was I going to go to? I worked at McDonald's for 4 years to help put myself through college. I worked at the local mall, and I worked at the college newspaper. I know how lucky in this country I've been to live in a time where my marriage and my family is recognized and where women have more rights. But there is so much more work to do in this nation. And I believe, if given the opportunity and your endorsement, that we can start that work together in January of 2019. Now, I first became a journalist out of college. And at the end of that career in 2015, I was responsible for 16,000 employees, and 3,000 of them right here in Minnesota. Manufacturing jobs, good jobs. Because of this, I know the importance of technical education in this country. I know the importance of making sure that every family has access to a good education. I know how important it is that working people in this country have a good job that is going to allow them to take care of their families and the next generation to make it into the middle class. I know how to create jobs because I've done it. As your member of Congress, I will work every single day to be the voice that this congressional district deserves. As your representative, I will never forget my life experience of growing up without access to health care. I'll never forget the bills that piled up on our kitchen table and the struggle that my mom went through to pay them. I will never forget where I've come from. And for that reason, I ask humbly for your vote. Thank you.
Okay, and now for the first question. Will you abide by the DFL endorsement? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Jeff Erdmann.
I'd like to start by thanking all those people that were involved with putting tonight on so that we can have an opportunity for people in the community to come out and learn about our campaigns. My name is Jeff Erdmann, and I'm running for the United States House of Representatives because I'm sick and tired of politics as usual. I've lived in Minnesota my whole life. In southeastern Minnesota called Lewiston. My dad worked in a flour mill down in Winona and benefited from being part of a strong union. My mom did daycare out of the home and usually had some kind of second job. They worked really hard for everything that we had to give us a chance at a better life, just like our families are trying to do today. After graduating high school, I went to Gustavus Adolphus College, and I met the love of my life, Ruth. I'm one of those guys that was fortunate enough to marry my best friend. Ruth is a speech therapist, and we've been blessed with 3 healthy kids that are going to be wonderful contributors in our society. They've been by my side as my teaching and coaching career has moved. I started out at New Richland, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva High School. Then we moved to Cannon Falls, and then to Winona. And now the last 18 plus years, I've been an American government teacher and head football coach at Rosemount High School. I've been serving my community my entire career. And now I'm going to serve our community in a different capacity. I believe being a teacher and coach is great preparation for being a true representative. For 28 plus years, I've gone to work every day looking out for the interests of my constituents. For 28 plus years, I've had town hall type meetings where I've had conversations with those that I serve. We call those parent-teacher conferences. I'm running because I'm frustrated with the significant role that big money is playing in our politics, and I'm not alone. It's time to turn the page. It's time that we write a new chapter, not just here in Minnesota, but in America. We are not here to just get by. We are not here to accept things for the way they are. We are here to form a more perfect union. This government is supposed to be by the people, for the people, not the corporations and politicians. It's time for a working class voice to be in Washington to represent our interests and our values. My entire professional career has been about lifting people up to reach their potential in the classroom and in the football field. And it's time that we lift each other up and make this country the place we believe it can be. I'm Jeff Erdmann, and I'm running for Congress because I believe we can. Thank you.
Okay, don't step away. Jeff, will you abide by the DFL endorsement? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, don't step away because you're going to answer the first question. And I should add, we're going to take a short break at approximately 7 o'clock. Okay, Jeff, what committees would you seek to serve on and why? This question was asked by Austin in Egan.
The first committee I'd choose to serve on is the Education and Workforce Committee, so I can protect the opportunity for a quality education for all students across our land, and so I can do everything possible to stop the voucher system from being implemented. I'd also choose to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We need to be moving towards a clean energy economy with a great sense of urgency, and we need leadership that's going to stand up to the fossil fuel industry. I'd also like to serve on the Agriculture Committee. We need to level the playing field between big ag and small and local farmers. And in order to do that, we need people there that are going to fight for them, and I'll do that.
Okay, Angie, what committee would you like to serve, would you seek to serve on and why?
So I'll start with transportation and infrastructure. I think that there is nothing more important here as we invest in greater Minnesota than making sure that we have complete access to broadband, high-speed internet in this country, because you can't actually access the world unless you have access to the internet. The best thing we could do to grow the economy is an investment in infrastructure in this nation. Highways, roads, bridges, broadband, water infrastructure, sewer. We have to get back to investing in America. The other thing we have to do is get back to investing in Americans. So I would also choose workforce and education, because I believe that we have to have a voluntary K through 14 education system in this country. We have to stand up and say every single young person has an opportunity and the privilege to go and get a technical degree or 2 years of a college degree paid for by the U.S. government by tax reform. And I'm sure I'm going to have an opportunity to talk about how that would get paid for through real tax reform. And finally, I'm going to go back to energy and commerce. It's a little bit naive of me to think, as a freshman, that I would immediately go to energy and commerce, because that doesn't typically happen with freshmen. It is much more the case that you get on transportation and infrastructure and you get on workforce and education than you do energy and commerce. But the reason I want to be on energy and commerce is because that's where healthcare gets decided in this country. As a person who grew up in a family without access to healthcare, I am going to fight every single day to make sure that every person in this country gets healthcare. And I'm just going to tell you that Jason Lewis has spent his first year in office trying to take health care away from Americans. And today, tomorrow, when they pass that bill, they're going to make it less affordable. We got to move away.
Okay. Perfect time. Okay, now, Angie, you'll be the first person to answer this question. This comes from Dan in Apple Valley. How will you persuade moderate Republicans to vote for you? How will they benefit by voting for you?
Well, I don't think there's any such thing as a moderate Republican anymore. They call themselves independents now because they don't want to be associated with the Republican Party. But here's how we make the case that they should vote for us. We make the progressive case. We tell them that this is how in this country you actually get ahead, because we are going to fight for working people. We tell them that we're going to focus on the good jobs of the future. We let them know that we're going to fight for more affordable health care for them and their families. We make sure that they know we're going to fight for education, whether it be a 4-year university or a job skill through an apprenticeship program or a technical education. We tell them our values. If we tell them our progressive values, they will vote for us. And so that's what I'm going to do in 2018, is I'm going to tell them our progressive values, and with all of your help, we're going to win. Because at the end of the day, what we've seen is if Democrats show up, if we show up, we win elections. And I can tell you that right now across this country, in Virginia, in New Jersey, the suburbs are showing up. This district is an 80% suburban district. This district will show up, and this district will choose to change direction from where this country is headed. Thank you.
Do you want me to repeat the question? No? Okay, now Jeff.
Our strong voice for political reform is absolutely resonating with those Republicans that don't like politics as usual. Our commitment to reducing the role of money in politics, ending gerrymandering, and standing up and promoting real democracy where one person, one vote is the lay of the land is resonating with those populists on the Republican side. We have moderate Republicans that are helping our campaign right now solely because they like our stance on standing up to the corporate greed and influence in our political system. Now, how will they benefit by voting for us? We will be providing them an opportunity to vote for a working class candidate that's going to challenge politics as usual while voting for laws to improve the quality of life for working Americans. That's why they're supporting our campaign.
Okay, you're going to want to stay here. The next question comes from the committee. We're at a senior center tonight, so we want to make sure that we're including issues that might interest those in my generation. Jeff, you'll be first. How can we keep Medicare and Medicaid readily available and solvent and protect us from a ballooning federal deficit?
The important role that Medicare plays is very important to me, and it's very real. When I was a young teacher at New Richland, I remember looking at one of my first checks and being disappointed with the dollar amount that was coming out for Medicaid. I remember thinking, I'm in the prime of my life right now, and I'd love to have that money to pay off my college debt. Well, as fate would have it, my mom got a rare kidney disease. About 2 to 3 weeks after that, she found out about it. And the medicine to keep her alive was going to cost about $5,000 a month. My mom and dad were hardworking people, but they would not be able to afford $5,000 a month. If it wasn't for a program like Medicaid, my mom and dad would have been sitting around the kitchen table and discussing, holy cow, we can't afford this. You're going to have to die. In the richest country in the world, not funding a program like that is shameful. I will never again worry about that little amount coming out of my check because of the important role Medicaid plays for all of us as Americans during a time of need. I understand what it means to be a team player. Now, in regards to making it affordable, paying for health care is something that we're obviously struggling with right now. I'm a big proponent of the Medicare for All system because it is the most cost-efficient way of providing all health care for all of our citizens.
I think I'm good. Social Security and Medicare, right? Is that good? Yeah, is that it? Okay, good. Medicare and Medicaid. So, you know, both of my parents just turned 66 years old. And Social Security is a critical lifeline to them. In fact, I don't know that my parents would be able to retire ever without working with just their Social Security. So the safety net that we've put up for Americans is so incredibly important. Remember the time before Social Security when America's seniors lived destitute in poverty, and when you needed to go into a care facility and Medicaid was not available or Medicare was not available, what happened? So I believe Social Security now has about 19 years left in the trust fund. We can immediately make Social Security more sustainable for this country by simply raising the cap on high-income earners to make sure that that is a sustainable program that is available to folks after a lifetime of hard work. Every single time you get your paycheck, you're paying into Social Security, you're paying into Medicare. That is your money, and we should make sure that those are sustainable programs moving forward. Thank you.
Angie, this question will be for you first. What is your plan to provide affordable health care for all at reasonable rates? Will it be single payer, private insurers, or something else? This question was asked by Tom in West St. Paul.
Thank you so much. So I still remember sitting at that kitchen table with my mom, and I still remember the bills that piled up on our family. And that box of bills sat there for years as my mom negotiated with insurance companies. I am absolutely firmly committed to getting this country to universal health care, where every single American has health care. That's exactly the stake in the ground that Bernie Sanders has put in his most recent bill. And so the question is, how do we get there? How do we get to universal health care? And for me, I believe there are a number of ways to get to universal health care in this country, not just one. I also believe if we believe there's only one way to get there, we'll never get there. So the first thing I think we need to do is stabilize the marketplace we have today. The cost subsidy reduction, it's got to be a long-term thing where people can count on the subsidy reductions. Tomorrow when that Senate bill passes, they're essentially removing the individual mandate. It is a tragedy, and we are going to see health costs go up as a result. The problem with the ACA was always, it actually didn't tackle the real issue, and that's cost of health care in this country. We never stood up in Washington to the pharmaceutical companies and told them, no, you must negotiate your pricing. We never stood up to the insurance companies to say, no, 20 to 30% in insurance fee cost. We can't do it in this country anymore. That's why I believe we need to move forward with a public option in this nation. I believe that we can price a buy-in to Medicare that will allow Medicare to compete with insurance companies, and I would be happy to make that happen.
Okay. Do you want me to repeat the question? Are you? Okay.
I absolutely support Medicare for all. Right now, healthcare costs are destroying our quality of life. If people get wage increases, we see those wage increases eaten up by insurance companies getting profits off that, increased costs for pharmaceuticals, and also possibly larger deductibles. The end result is that we get a lower quality of living so that big pharma, insurance companies, and medical device companies can make incredible profits and pay their leadership millions of dollars. This isn't news to anybody. We all know it. We all see it. Now, in regards to how to pay for Medicare for all, we have a detailed policy paper on our website that promotes Medicare for all and how that is going to be paid for. We'd love to have you go visit it. It's at Erdmann-1st.com. I'm running to lift working people up, and I'm proud to be a constant supporter of Medicare for all.
Jeff, you'll be first. This question is from Joe in West St. Paul. What can we do to stop voter suppression efforts that have skewed election results to favor more unpopular candidates? And how do we reinstate a paper ballot system that cannot be hacked and could give more accurate results?
We as Americans, we should challenge the attempts to take away our right to vote at every opportunity that we can have. Today, in our society, we have Republicans promoting policies that are making it harder for people to vote. Photo IDs, reducing the number of polling places across our country, especially in areas where diverse voters are voting, so that they discourage them from actually casting their vote by standing in line, and reducing early voting opportunities. All of this is done to deter us from voting. This is un-American. Now, in my class, I'm going to explain this so you can kind of get a feel for this, because I think this is a real simple concept. When we have, in my class, if I have student A, and student A cheats on the test, should I punish student A or all the other students? Well, everybody knows you punish student A. They're the one that did something wrong. If I have citizen A, and citizen A votes 16 times, do we punish the voter, citizen A, or do you punish all the rest? That's an easy concept, okay? You punish the person that did the mistake, that voted 16 times. And so any attempt to restrict voting is an effort to punish the non-cheaters, and it's a direct attempt to reduce voter turnout. This, again, is un-American. Now, with the direct attacks that we've seen in our democracy by other countries, it is more imperative than ever that we have a way to track and recount votes and have a paper trail. I would absolutely support the strategy to help legitimize that process. Thank you.
So in Minnesota, we already have paper balloting. We already have evidence. We can go back and look at those ballots. And I think absolutely I would support making sure that every state across this country has a way to go back. But it goes beyond that. This goes back to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This goes back with an absolute attempt to suppress the vote among certain groups of people around this country. And as a member of Congress, I will absolutely support automatic voter registration. I will support making sure that we never have a voter ID law like the one that we defeated in 2012 in this state. And I will make sure that this election process and democracy remains open to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, Angie, you'll be first for the next question. We're going to shift over to the environment. If you were given the opportunity to be lead author of the top priority environmental bill introduced in the democratically controlled 2019 session of Congress, what would your bill do and how?
So the first environmental measure that I would sign up to support is to be a co-sponsor on a bill that would place a carbon fee and dividend. It's a policy that is actually supported by the Citizens Climate Lobby. And it's really one of the most innovative ways that I've seen to reduce CO2 emissions and get this country back on track when it comes to climate change. Because it is bipartisan, it is revenue neutral, it addresses climate change by placing a fee on the source of the pollution, but it returns that fee in the form of a dividend to households across this nation. And I believe that we are going to have to stand up and have progressive policies to do that. Obviously, we're going to have to find some Republicans who actually believe that climate change is real and who actually believe in science for a change. But that is one of the biggest opportunities I think we have to impact climate change. And guys, time's running out. Time is running out. If you look at what is happening with the rising temperatures around this world, if you think about just the foreign policy challenges of additional refugees who are fleeing places that are no longer inhabitable, if you think about the consequences, the economic consequences, what we've already seen in Puerto Rico and in Texas, the economic consequences here. If we don't wise up and realize that if we don't address this issue, it's going to cause a national crisis when it comes to the economy as well as defense. Thank you.
We should be promoting a comprehensive energy policy that promotes renewable energy like wind and solar, energy conservation, and a carbon dividend program as Angie just talked about. That type of program can reduce our carbon emissions by 90% by year 2050. Such an approach can bring us lower energy costs, allow our businesses to be more competitive globally, and help us be more authentic in our foreign policy, since we won't have to use our military to protect access to oil. This approach will save Americans money, create jobs, and ensure that we do everything we can to preserve our environment for generations to come.
Jeff, you'll be first to answer this next question about the environment. This question was submitted by Carol in Red Wing. The climate change plan promotes increases in wind and solar, but does little to alter production of emissions other than a percentage change. Do you agree that reduction of CO2 emissions is a primary factor in addressing climate change? What policy changes will you promote to reduce CO2 emissions? Jeff?
Can you read that again?
I sure could. The climate change plan promotes increases in wind and solar, but does little to alter production of emissions other than a percentage change. Do you agree that reduction of CO2 emissions is a primary factor in addressing climate change? What policy changes will you promote to reduce CO2 emissions?
The most straightforward approach for reducing CO2 emissions is to go with a dividend program. The dividend program is going to aggressively attack carbon emissions because it does it twofold. Not only does it take care of the footprints of us as citizens in our role, because we have money coming to us through those dividends that we can save more money off of it if we are reducing our own carbon footprint, but also from the industrial side, we reduce it as well, because the incentives for them to find new technologies to reduce carbon emissions from the industrial perspective, and so it's a win-win, and we need to have a strong, aggressive approach that is all-encompassing of citizenry and our industry.
So I just came out in support of the carbon dividend plan, which, of course, I think we need to implement on that question as well, Sue. But I will tell you that, look, this just makes good economic sense to us, right? Renewable energy, clean energy jobs are growing at 16% in Minnesota. If we invest in more renewable energy, we are going to see better and greater jobs growth. So this argument that, we have to make trade-offs, we have to invest. We cannot cede leadership to China. We cannot cede our authority as a leader anywhere. And we've been doing that with the current administration. And I'm incredibly fed up with Jason Lewis not standing up and talking about, obviously he doesn't even believe climate change exists, but not talking about the leadership that we are ceding globally. When we pulled out, when this administration decided that the Paris Climate Accords were no longer important, at the time, only Syria and Nicaragua had not signed on the dotted line. Well, guess what today? Syria and Nicaragua are now part of the agreement, and the United States of America is still standing on the sidelines. America doesn't stand on the sidelines. As a member of Congress, I will fight every single day to make sure that's not where this country's standing. Thank you.
Okay, Angie, you'll be the first one for this question. It comes from the committee. Should the federal government change how we subsidize agriculture?
Look, this is an incredibly important and personal topic to me. I grew up in rural America. My grandfather farmed beans and rice, and during the 1980s farm crisis, my grandpa lost his job. And so I've seen what can happen to a family when farmers do not have a safety net in this country. And so one of my highest priorities will be to make sure that I'm fighting for that safety net for farmers, the crop insurance that they need to make sure that you don't see that kind of volatility in farming. It's already hard enough to be a farmer. I was on a hog farm in Nerstrand about 3 weeks ago, and I talked to the brothers who were leading me around here and making sure that there is a strong farm bill, working with people like Colin Peterson, who obviously is chair of the Ag Committee, and or Democratic leader of the Ag Committee, and making sure that I understand ag policy, because we have to support America's farmers. And I will say as well that the second biggest issue for farmers is actually health care. That's what they tell me when I talk to them. It's one spouse has to go work just to make sure the family has health care, or it's the family is paying in the individual marketplace rates that no family can sustain. So working to make sure that this country has affordable access to health care is another way that we help America's farmers. And finally, the infrastructure investment that we talked about earlier. It's critical for farmers. The ability for highways, roads, bridges, broadband, the ability for farmers to make sure that they are managing their land, they need broadband access. Because today you can actually send a drone over a field, and that drone can tell a farmer where to fertilize or where to fertilize less or more. That is going to have a huge environmental impact, and it's very important to me. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff?
We should absolutely change how we subsidize farming. Farm subsidies were originally created to help farmers manage the risks associated with farming. There are lots of variations, obviously, in crop diseases, market price fluctuation, and the weather. Our political reality, though, is that these subsidies are corrupted toward 5 major crops that benefit the largest corporate farms in our country. 60% of all subsidies go to big ag, so that small and local farmers get nothing. Our local and small farmers have huge risks every year, and it's growing every year because of climate change. It's time we elect representatives who are going to prioritize getting our small farmers the subsidies they need so that we can grow our local economies and we can develop wealth in our rural communities.
Okay, Jeff, you'll be the first to answer the next question. This is submitted by the committee. The Trump administration is renegotiating NAFTA. What would you do to make sure agriculture has a seat at the table?
Of course, agriculture should have a seat at the table. As a whole, the agriculture industry makes up the largest share of overall American exports. However, it shouldn't be just big ag at the table. We need more representatives who will fight for small and local farms. Several European nations and Canada, they won't import many of our ag products because their standards are higher. So importing in that area could open up new markets for ag exports across the land. Let's invest in food safety and make sure that the biggest companies follow the rules, because it's good for the consumer and will help open new foreign markets for our ag exports.
Go ahead one more time with the question.
The Trump administration is renegotiating NAFTA. What would you do to make sure agriculture has a seat at the table?
Thanks, Sue. There are like 9 ag questions on the list they sent us, so I was thinking about one of the other ones. Look, the renegotiation of NAFTA is incredibly important to this nation's farmers. Again, I was just on a farm where we talked about that. But also making sure that our trade agreements have strong worker protections inside them is critically important. The most important thing is that there is a level playing field across Canada and Mexico. And the truth is, with a lot of the trade agreements that a president has entered into, the playing field has not been level for America's workers. And so we need to absolutely make sure that farmers can get their goods. It's an important market. I think we export somewhere between 7 and 8 billion just out of Minnesota each year. The Minnesota ag is the 5th largest in the country. Making sure $19 to $20 billion of opportunity does not go unthwarted is really important. So, but we have to balance that with worker protections and environmental concerns. There's absolutely no doubt in those trade agreements.
We have time for one more question before we take a short break. And Angie, you will answer this first. It also comes from the committee. President Trump scrapped U.S. involvement with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or we call it TPP. Now the U.S. has no leverage to secure worker and environmental protections. Would you have supported the TPP? Why or why not?
Look, I start out saying that, look, I want to support good trade. Trade is an opportunity. I understand that 95% of the world's markets are outside the United States. But the Trans-Pacific Partnership was not a fair trade deal. And I stood up in 2015 and 2016 and said that. If you want to put a bill together that, again, focuses on the environmental protection, worker protection, instead of something that allows the Chinese to dump bad steel into America, then you put it forward. But until you put forward a fair bill that's going to put America on a level playing field, until you get a trade agreement where China is not subsidizing its private industry, you're not going to be on a level playing field. And so you're right, the time to negotiate is now. But worker protection and environmental standards have got to be part of that negotiation if America is going to be on a level playing field.
The problem with the TPP and other big international trade deals is that they're generally designed to boost the biggest transnational businesses at the expense of small business, the American worker, and environment. However, if President Trump was no longer in charge and a progressive was in the White House, we should use America's influence to shape this deal to benefit workers and promote stronger environmental rights. There are 12 nations still actively engaged in the agreement. Our unilateral withdrawal has ceded enormous economic influence to Japan, who, for better or worse, is now the most influential country in that coalition. America has no power to shape public policy if we're not at the table. If we return to the table after President Trump, we'll have major leverage and should use it to make the deal look like what progressive Democrats would want it to look.
Wasn't it Barack Obama's? Sorry.
I left my glasses over here. We are going to take a brief break. At 7:10, we'll resume. Remember that if you're using social media, to use the hashtag MN02, not O2 as in the letter O, but MN02. And I really want to show my appreciation to the Apple Valley Senior Center. They've been wonderful to work with. They're a fantastic facility. Very helpful in setting up, and I highly recommend it if you want to seek a community resource to use for future events. Okay, we'll take a break until 7:10. For the second half, we are going to be asking questions again with the same format, alternating, and Jeff will go first. And once we wrap up the questions, each candidate will be given the opportunity for a 3-minute wrap-up. And after each candidate wraps up, you will be welcome to applaud and cheer, anything you want. I really appreciate how quiet you've been for this forum, so thank you very much. Jeff, you are first for the next question. It has to do with immigration, and it comes from the committee. Do you believe illegal immigrants should have a path to U.S. citizenship? Outline the steps to citizenship that you would include in legislation as chief author of the Immigration Act of 2019.
When addressing immigration reform, it needs to be made clear that we need to make work visas and other legal modes for entry more accessible. What many U.S. citizens don't realize is that how incredibly difficult it is for people in other countries to get to the U.S. legally. It takes years and years, requires lots of money, proper documentation, and overcoming all kinds of bureaucratic nightmares. For the undocumented immigrants who are here, we need to provide a clear path to citizenship. These families are members of our community and catalysts in improving our economies and creating a better future. And they're living out the American dream right in front of us. The steps to citizenship for individuals without papers should start with reinstating DACA, and for individuals who are not students, we need to provide them with a way to get identification and the lawyers that they need. People who are here paying taxes and are productive members of our society should have a way to obtain legal status for themselves and their families.
The kids who are affected, the DACA kids, the DREAM Act is incredibly, incredibly important. These kids are my own son's school classmates. These kids are in this country, and they are every bit as American as my great-grandparents were when they came to this country. And so we absolutely have to rise up and defend and find a path to citizenship and make sure that these kids have that opportunity. I serve on the board of Inver Hills Community College. It's one of the things that I do in my spare time, their foundation. And one of the roles that I play on that foundation is I help raise money for a development committee so that these kids can get part of their tuition paid, because as you know, today they are not eligible for the kind of financial help that they would be eligible for otherwise. This is an incredibly important issue to me. As long as we do not have a system that supports a legal path to immigration for undocumented immigrants, people are going to go around our system. In 2013, the Senate put together a bipartisan group of lawmakers, and they got one step closer. The outline, the draft, it included work visas. It included a path to citizenship over a period of time for people who come here and work hard and obey the rules. That is what we have to move forward to in this country, is a path to citizenship for people who are here working hard, and we absolutely must protect our DACA kids. Thank you.
Okay, Angie, you will answer the next question first. This also comes from the committee. The Trump administration recently announced acknowledging Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. How will this impact our interests in the Middle East?
We have to be in a position to help lead the Middle East to a two-state solution that works for both sides. And what the Trump administration just did is create more havoc and chaos in a region that is already filled with just that. And so this is a huge strategic mistake if our long-term mission is peace in the Middle East.
This decision will create even more volatility in the region. This decision appears to go directly against the two-state solution that has been at the center of all discussions for peace between Palestine and Israel. President Trump's decision is dangerous and absolutely unnecessary.
Okay, Jeff, you'll be first answering the next question. And this comes from the committee. What should the Democratic Party's message be in 2018?
I think that no matter what Republicans do, we as Democrats must have our own proactive, positive message that stands on its own. We have to be more than just not Republicans. Let us be the party that's going to provide everyone health care through Medicare for all. We know our political system is broken. Let's be the ones to fix it. Let's be the party that says we're going to stop or reduce big money and special interests in politics. Let us be the party that's going to boldly stand and say we're going to remove the cap on the deadline for the ERA so we can have democracy play out and we can have the 28th Amendment be the Equal Rights Amendment. Let us be the party that brings a lifetime ban on lobbying for members of Congress so that people that are running for office are running for the right reasons. And let us be the party that makes college more affordable. Let us be the party that's going to raise people's wages and give our country hope for the future. We can be more than just not them.
I think in 2018, we have to have a core economic message. The message that voters sent us in 2016 when they elected Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, is that they're fed up. They're fed up that their paycheck isn't going up, but their health care costs are, their prescription drug costs are, their grocery bill is, and what have Democrats done about it? We have to come forward with a strong plan, and we have to get the message across that it's about the economy. It's about jobs. It's about work skills. It's about making sure that someone has access to a technical education so that we can match the job skills that are available in a regional economy so that people can take care of their families. We have to focus on reducing the cost of health care. And that is a very, very different conversation than a conversation about access. The ACA was a conversation about access. It was not a conversation about cost. And we have got to get to the cost issue in this country. And then finally, we got to focus on education. This is the first generation that actually believes that their kids may not have a better life than they had. If we say that there is a voluntary K through education system in this country, whereas the opportunity to get a technical degree, an apprenticeship program, or 2 years of your university funded by tax reform by closing loopholes in our current tax code that Congress doesn't have the guts to close today. Hedge fund managers are making billions of dollars in this nation. Let's divert it and invest in our people.
Angie, you'll be first to answer this question. Excuse me. Does federal government support of private education affect public education? I hope it isn't just a yes or no.
Yes. Absolutely. We are not fulfilling our promise in this country at the federal level to support education. One of the first bills that I would offer when I get to Congress is tax reform that would generate revenue so that we could send $16 billion back to the state for education and for teacher pay raises. It is an absolute disgrace that in this country, my mother, who worked 10 years to get her college degree and become a teacher, is still teaching at 66 years old and still in another state doesn't make more than $50,000 a year. It is an absolute disgrace that we are not supporting our teachers in this country. And as a member of Congress, that is the first bill I would want my name on, is to make sure that we are investing in education. The other issue we have in a lot of our local communities is that we're going back to voters every year or two asking for more money in the form of tax levies. That's because the federal government is not fulfilling its promise. The federal government is supposed to fund 40% of special education in this country. One of the challenges our district has is that they're trying to serve those kids. Well, those kids are one of my kids. And I've been in those IEP meetings, and I've been fighting for my son for years. And as a member of Congress, I will fight for all of our kids who have special needs and make sure that absolutely we don't forget that our highest priority is investing in Americans and in people.
All right, the question was, does federal government support of private education affect public education? Absolutely it does. If the government chooses to use public funds to support private education, it is prioritizing the education of a few students over the education of all students. Any public money invested in private education is money that could have been used to make our public education system better. Public schools are required to serve all students rather than being able to pick and choose which ones we want based on the private school model. Private schools are not required to provide the same level of services to students with disabilities as public schools are. Private schools are also allowed to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation and on the basis of religion, and that type of discrimination should not be publicly funded. One of the most fundamental concepts of a quality public education program is that it educates all students to reach their potential. We are not going to be able to do that if we divert funds to private schools.
Jeff, you'll be the first one to answer this question. Again, it comes from the committee. What are the challenges and solutions for the federal government regarding vocational education?
Here are the challenges we have. We have to do a better job of promoting community and technical colleges as great post-secondary options. So much of what students hear in high school and younger is about four-year college, and that option is oftentimes not a good fit for all students. Our country benefits when our community and technical colleges are full and preparing students for entry into the workplace with the skills necessary to be successful. Solutions. We need to get students excited about the opportunities offered by community and technical colleges throughout their K-12 experiences. Now, there's also a correlation to family wealth and academic success in K-12 education. If we as a country are going to reduce the wealth inequalities and we as a country need to reduce the wealth inequalities and lift up the quality of life for families in our communities. This correlation is not going to go away if we don't. We will continue to struggle connecting students to the opportunities that community and technical colleges offer.
So my strong view on this comes from that I led a workforce of 3,000 employees in Minnesota. And thousands of those employees did not have a traditional four-year degree, but they sure did have a good job on a manufacturing floor, working a CNC machine. For the first part of my career, I worked for an orthopedics maker, an orthopedics manufacturing company, and my entire floor was filled with machinists. These are technical skills that provide an incredible working job, middle-class job, and at the end of the day, they don't require a college degree. I also have a strong feeling on this because I have 4 boys right now, and well, I always have 4 boys, but I have 4 boys. 3 of them are in college right now, and 1 is at high school, actually at Rosemount. And college is probably right for 2 of our 3 sons, but we've got one of them who's thinking about making a transition, moving into a technical program where he can make a good living, and I'm encouraging him to think about that because I think we do have to change the way we think about education, and not every student is going to want to go to college. Not every student will have that opportunity, and we have to make sure if we're going to create economic growth in Minnesota and across this country that there is a path to a work skill. And again, I will sign up, sponsor, advocate for a voluntary K through 14 education system that will do just that.
Okay, Angie, this one is for you to answer first. This comes from Aaron in Lakeville. As a member of Congress, what legislation would you support to prevent gun violence in this country?
Well, I am incredibly honored that Gabby Giffords is supporting my campaign for Congress. Let me just start with that. Now, I also have spent plenty of time around firearms. I grew up around them out in rural America, and we have 2 sons that hunt, and we have one that trap shot in high school. And I've been known to be out at the Egan Gun Club with my boys trap shooting, and it's a lot of fun. So you can be a sportsman or woman in this country, or a hunter in this country, and advocate for common sense gun reform. To me, this is not about anything other than what are the things we can do to prevent unnecessary deaths in this country. And so I believe with all of my heart that we should have background checks on everything. Obviously, we should also ban bump stocks that allow us to turn weapons into weapons that can kill a lot of people. We should keep people who are on the no-fly list, keep the guns out of their hands legally. And we should also look at the evidence. In states that have implemented gun safety reforms, the number of violent offenses dealing with from domestic assault goes down dramatically. It's almost 50%. The number of self-completed suicides goes down again. So I think we need to look at the evidence, and for goodness sake, we need to lift the CDC ban on studying this issue. This is a public health crisis, and good gun owners that I know support making sure that we treat it as such.
Last year in our football season, we had an incredible 3-overtime win in our last game to win the district championship. I'm on the bus ride going home, and I'm thinking, all right, the guys are going to be talking about the game we just played. The 2 closest to me weren't. They were talking about getting to go hunting with their grandpa on the weekend. And one of them, his grandpa was going to bring the musket that was going to get passed down from one generation to the next. And it was fun seeing them and the excitement they had talking about being able to go have an intergenerational experience with their grandpa. As a guy in education, that's something that we value, and there's great value in that. And so it's important that people understand the value that families have and that those memories that are important customs in their family. It's important for me to recognize that. Now, that story represents one side of gun ownership. We're all aware of the other side and the mass killings. In the United States, we have 5% of the world's population, and we have 31% of the mass shootings occurring. I support common sense gun legislation like universal background checks that 90% of Americans agree with. The gun show loophole should be closed to prevent private sellers from selling to people that do not have background checks. And finally, there's no reason to have automatic assault weapons, and after Las Vegas, we need to get bump stocks off the streets.
The next question will go to Jeff first. It's from Tom in West St. Paul. Will you author or sign on to legislation giving power back to workers to enable them to strike an employer for better wages and conditions without fear of being replaced, fired, or locked out? Legislation that deflates corporate control and monopolization of the middle class and working poor.
My quality of life has absolutely benefited because of my involvement with unions and my dad's involvement. You know, my dad worked in a flour mill in Winona, and because of the strong union, he was able to provide a middle-class lifestyle for us. Sundays, he got double time. Saturdays, he got time and a half. And he had a good pension that he's experiencing now. As a high school teacher, I've been involved in a union for 28 years. And my family has absolutely benefited by the perks that unions are able to get through collective bargaining. I will be a very strong proponent for unions and fighting for unions so that other working class Americans can have those same types of benefits and improvements to their quality of life that I've experienced in my family and my mom and dad's family.
No, I think I got the question. So the reason I'm standing here today is probably because of my grandmother. When my mom became a single mom, she moved 3 doors down in that mobile home park, and she helped raise 3 kids so her daughter could go to school and get a college degree. My grandmother went to a union shoe factory every single day, and I remember it so vividly. She came home every night with glue all over her clothes. That's because her job was to stand and dip heels in glue all day long. On 2 occasions, because my grandmother worked until she was in her 70s, she needed her union reps' help. And they walked in with her and they helped save her job. They didn't just save her job, they saved our family. That's how important that union job was to my family. I am so incredibly honored that I have the support of the Teamsters, the steelworkers, the painters, that I have about 8 labor organizations in Minnesota who've said, Angie, we believe in you. We know that you will support us. And I will support all labor and working people across this country, whether they belong to a labor organization or not, because that is the backbone of America, and that is what built this middle class, and that is what is going to do it again if we make certain that we don't allow ourselves to become Wisconsin, and we don't allow ourselves to absolutely abandon labor in this country. This is the DFL, and that L matters in this party. And don't ever forget how much that L matters. Thank you.
Angie, you'll be the first to answer this question. It comes from Carolyn Red Wing. Homelessness is rising in CD2. A person working full-time at minimum wage. Okay, I'm going to read this verbatim. So, a person working full-time at minimum wage would pay 50 to 75% of income for a crappy studio apartment. What will you do to increase wages and training opportunities for higher-paying jobs?
So this is a complex question, and it's a complicated answer, and 2 minutes is not going to do it justice. But what I will tell you is that my wife Cheryl and I, and she's here, so just hi, honey. She and I are involved in the Dakota County project, and I was really, really pleased to see that first night was held at Grace Lutheran, where our family is a member, in supporting homelessness in Dakota County. But it's complex because it's not just about wages, it's also about affordable housing. And so I have absolutely said I will support a living wage, and that means we need to raise the minimum wage. Secondly, I will work tirelessly to bring the manufacturing jobs of the future to this district, to this state, and to this country, to make sure that when we are creating the next evolution of renewable energy jobs, they're done right here. But there is a huge issue within each of our communities. I sat down with the mayor of Red Wing recently, and I attended a few meetings from an organization called Red Wing Vision 2040. And one of the biggest issues in our district and many of our communities is actually affordable housing. And, you know, it's not just young people either. The housing just doesn't exist. So we've got to make sure that in our federal policies, we are encouraging these developers to make sure that they are creating affordable housing in our communities. We've got to revision some of the redevelopment that needs to occur within our communities. It's an incredibly important issue, and since I'm on a tangent, I'll also add that in some of these communities, it's not jobs. The jobs are there. People want to live there. They cannot find the housing, and that is going to hurt economic growth. And by the way, they also can't find childcare. So if you can't find childcare and housing, you can't take the good job. This is all interconnected, and so that's what makes it complex.
Thank you. Jeff?
Okay, just to share the question again. What will you do to increase wages and training opportunities for higher paying jobs? It's time to raise the wage. I've talked to many people out on our campaign that are working 2 to 3 part-time jobs just to get by. While corporate profits have skyrocketed over the last few decades, working class Americans are seeing our incomes stay relatively flat. So while many in CD2 are employed, too many are working longer hours for the same type of standard of living that they had years ago. A $15 minimum wage is coming. To get our economy working for everyone means getting more income into their hands because they're going to spend it out in the community. They're not going to put it in a bank in some other country. In regards to training, free tuition for 2-year trade schools and more union apprenticeships programs are needed as well to help in this area. And that's going to take us on a better path. We've got to get money into working class Americans' hands.
Jeff, you'll be first to answer the next question. Dan from Burnsville gave us a bit of a challenge. He asks each of you to refute trickle-down economics.
Trickle-down economics has consistently shown it does not bring positive results for working class Americans. In the civil rights movement, those people that were oppressing minorities would suggest that the protesters should give it time for real change to happen. Your rights will eventually come. This approach always benefits the oppressor. This same approach is what trickle-down economics represents. We have tremendous income inequality in our society today, and the Republicans continue to seek to oppress working Americans with the tax reform and the benefits that go to the wealthiest Americans. We've seen this recently. At a time when we have unemployment at 4%, there's no legitimate argument that tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans are going to bring real progress for working American lifestyles. What does happen is that we see an increase in the growing income disparity, and that translates into real political power that they're going to use to exploit the government and even bring more advantages to the wealthiest of our corporations and individuals.
Well, we already have evidence it doesn't work. It didn't work under Reagan. I can tell you it didn't work because I was living in a trailer park under Reagan, and I was 12 years old. And you know what? None of that trickled down to my family. And so that's why I am absolutely livid. I believe that Republicans are about to light a match to economic inequality in this country with this tax bill. The idea that you give permanent tax breaks to corporations and you pull their tax rate down to 21%, but you don't close all the loopholes that they already have, to me, that is going to lead us down the path that none of us want to go down. The idea that real tax reform has been left off the table. Real tax reform would be putting money back in the hands of the people who are going to spend it. When you cut rates for people at the top, when you give them more economic certainty, you know what that's going to mean? Just more income inequality. They're not going to spend that money. We're not going to see economic growth come out of this. And then probably the worst of all is the idea that we are going to, for a few people, we're going to do something, but it's temporary. And corporations, they get to run off with the money forever. And so as a member of Congress, you better bet when Republicans and when this administration come up with an idea that is going to continue to widen the income inequality gap, you better bet I'm going to stand in front of them. I'm going to lay down in front of them, and you just wait. I did work in a business for 22 years, 2 different businesses. And you just wait for the first CEO who tries to BS me, talking about what's happening inside their business. You know what's about to happen? They're bringing the repatriated earnings back. You know what's going to happen? They're going to repurchase their shares. It's going to boost their stock, and it's going to give more money to people who are in the stock market. Well, I can tell you where I came from. We weren't in the stock market. And so you're exactly right. Working people do need a break, and I believe I am the person to stand there. Happy to, Sue. Never.
Okay, we have time for one last question before we go to our closing remarks for tonight. This question will go to Angie first. It comes from Tom in West St. Paul. What would you do to protect the U.S. Postal Service from privatization?
This is a great question for right now because, in all honesty, we have to say thank you to the millions of postal workers and letter carriers right now who are delivering our packages. I see them on the road every day of the week, on Sundays, day and night, and that's only going to get more stressful as this web economy continues to move forward. Our postal workers, I don't know if you know this, but this is the only federal organization that is expected to pre-fund their retirement benefits. And what they're trying to do is economically kill the Postal Service because you know what they want to do? Privatize it. And so I will, once again, work with any administration who has a good idea, and I will lay down in the road and be a cement roadblock for bad ideas in this administration. This organization is incredible, and we have to absolutely support them. And they are doing a great job for this country. And at this moment in time in the holiday season, don't forget to thank your letter carrier or your postal worker.
And if you live up in the Richfield area, set out a nice present because my brother's a postal delivery man up there. And he'll appreciate that. Our postal system isn't struggling. And the post office is the second largest employer other than Walmart. Republicans have been attacking the postal system for years. The so-called fiscal crisis that they face is a GOP-manufactured one that began back in 2006 when Congress required the Postal Service to pre-fund 75 years of its retirees' health benefits, which no other private company or federal agency has to do. That adds between $5 and $6 billion to its cost each year, which would bankrupt most entities. The GOP did this deliberately so the postal system would lose money and they could argue for privatization. I'll be an extremely loud defender of the U.S. postal system.
We're going to wrap up. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to tell a little more about themselves with their closing comments. We will be holding 2 more forums on January 15th at St. John's Lutheran Church in Northfield, and on January 22nd at the Red Wing Senior Center. They're both scheduled to start at the same time, 6:15, just like we started tonight, and they are also on Monday evenings. Jeff, you are welcome to speak in a second. I want to remind you that you can continue to submit questions for the upcoming forums. We have a form that you can fill out by going to our CD2 DFL website. It's dflcd2.org. And fill out the form there. It's a Google Doc. It's interactive, very easy to fill out. If you're in the audience attending tonight, you're very welcome to write down a question and give it to Peggy Ann Hawkins, who's helping with the committee, and she's assembling questions. You can also go to our CD2 Facebook page if you are a member of the group and ask there, and we will look for your input diligently, I hope. Okay, Jeff, thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody that was involved with sponsoring this event tonight. I've been fortunate to have been hired 4 different times to take over programs that have been struggling and lost their way. In each one of those situations, I've gone in and shared a vision for the future about how to be successful. And then, on a day-to-day basis, we lived out our values to make that happen. This approach has brought success as people who align with those values have jumped on the bus and helped make that vision become a reality. Here's my vision for our future. I believe we need to address the income inequality in our nation. With the concentration of wealth that is occurring in our society, more and more people are seeing their quality of life go down. The top 1% are buying political influence, which leads to the benefits for wealthiest of our corporations and individuals. Focus on short-term financial success for a few has replaced long-term success for our country, and this has to end. I believe in the future where the government focus is on how we can raise the quality of life for our people. We need to invest in our people's health through the Medicare for All. We need to invest in our people's education so that we can reach our potential as individuals and become educated citizens that strengthen our democracy. And we should be adopting policies that preserve our planet for those generations yet to come. And we should be promoting political change that makes us more democratic and promotes our wonderful diversity. We have an incredible opportunity in front of us with all the people getting involved that want to bring real reform. These types of movements are started by us, the people. I'm proud to be a part of that movement that wants to bring real political change and not accept status quo politics as usual. When we come together, we can do anything. We can make this country the place we believe it can be. It's time to make the people's house stand for the people again. I'm Jeff Erdmann, and it's time for change.
Thank you so much for being here tonight and to listening to us talk about our vision and our values. For me, this is what this really is about. It's living through the values that I lived through all those years ago of making sure that every family in this country gets a fair shot. And I learned those values by watching my mom. She got a fair shot. That many years ago in this country, that was possible. I learned those values from my grandmother, who taught me to work hard every single day. And if I did that 28 years ago, I too could pay my way through college and maybe even someday make it into the middle class. That was the American dream that was available to us 28 years ago. That dream is disappearing for way too many families in this country. My wife and I, Cheryl and I, have been so fortunate. We know exactly how lucky we've been. And my only goal here in representing you is to make sure that every family in this country gets a fair shot. Every single one of us. It doesn't matter if you're born, no matter where you're born, you've got a fair shot. And that's what people want. They want to work hard. The only thing that should stop anyone is their own will to succeed. And so we've got to step forward and we have to fight for those good jobs, for education, for affordable health care. We've got to step forward and fight. I am so honored to be standing here today. Last election, we built a campaign of 2,000 distinct volunteers. We built a campaign that moved, name recognition-wise, from 2% to 70%. Jason Lewis started with 50%. 50%. I'm here again today because Jason Lewis is not representing our district. I'm here today because I believe that I am the woman to take this congressional seat in 2018. I'm here today because I believe in a country where voters, if they're unhappy with the direction of a nation, that they step forward and they change that direction. I'm here again today because in my life, progress has never been linear. I've been at the marches and I've worked alongside you. And I will tell you this, if you give me the honor of one more match, with your help, we will win in 2018. Thank you.
Give both of them. We have a few handouts. I want to thank both Angie and Jeff. Tonight was fabulous. I look forward to the next two events. The 2nd Congressional District DFL wants to empower potential caucus attendees and voters to understand who our candidates are. We have two wonderful candidates. We have some really good handouts in the back. Linda Larson is back at the table, and Linda Garrett Johnson, the two Lindas. We have activist calling cards with the contact information for elected representatives, and it includes Representative Jason Lewis, so you can contact him. But remember, your vote is your voice. February 6th is Precinct Caucuses. This is the gateway to involvement with the DFL and to becoming a delegate to help endorse a candidate. Our Congressional convention is going to be held on April 14th at Burnsville High School. It'll be a wonderful location for us. And the state convention is June 1st through 5th, where we'll endorse our statewide candidates. General election, November 6th in 2018. So we have all of that to look forward to. Make sure that you've signed in and you're getting our activist alerts, because we want to make sure you're connected to learn about how you can keep helping to elect DFLers in this district and throughout Minnesota and to help the country. Thank you again for attending. You were a great audience.